My name is Sebastien Lavoie, and I'm doing my PhD here, doing electronic dance music with the perspective of specialization. The reason why I came here to Huddersfield, specifically because of this studio we have here at the university called the Spatial. And when I saw this studio, it really showed me that there's a really big interest towards specialization. And I come from, I would say, the world of electroacoustic music as a composer. And so since 2007, I started to compose music using sound material, music concrete. And I really liked this type of music that was paying attention to space. So for me, I thought that stereo was quite interesting, but to be able to go to a concert and to really immerse yourself in sound and to have space as a parameter of music composition, as much as rhythm, as much as harmony, but to have space that people were thinking where they would locate and create a movement with sound. I thought that was a really interesting perspective. Although before starting music composition, I was playing ice hockey, so I was not really into music since an early age, and I spent a lot of time in nightclubs. So deep inside of me, there's a kid that likes to dance, that likes to move. And so when it was time to do a big project for the PhD, I said, I want to do something that I really care about, and I really care about electronic dance music, which is not often the case that we see electronic dance music in university level education. But I do believe it has its place, and it's going to continue to do so because we see that there's real interesting production with it, and we see that there's quality producer making music with this as well. And I think the young generation will also be influenced with what's happening right now on the radio, and I feel like electronic music has really an important presence today. So the young generation will continue, well, not that it's going to replace traditional instrument like a piano or a guitar, but if I were 10 years old, I would definitely go and make electronic dance music. First of all, because it is accessible, it is affordable, because most people do have a computer, and there's lots of software. So to go and start the project, I wanted to do something that was easy, accessible. So I didn't want it to find specific project or tools that could be very specific. I'm trying to go towards more the commercial and more practical and popular to make sure that we can have an outreach and not to be too specific. So electronic dance music, then I started to explore more doing music with Ableton Live, and Ableton Live allowed me to make music differently than with Logic. Logic was, for me, a beautiful canvas where I was putting my sound and painting sound, but with beats, I think it requires a different mindset and different structure, and the way Ableton works, it kind of fitted the way I wanted to compose electronic dance music. And on top of it, they came out with a tablet called Push, and that really started to kind of allow me to go to a dimension of music that I didn't explore before, because I was just a composer. And again, to go back to the kid that was in a nightclub and really enjoyed dancing and moving, and as opposed as being a composer in a studio and seated, I felt again that there was some limitation that I was not completely satisfied. So now to have a chance to, in a performance, in a concert setting, to have a chance to have my hands a bit more on the final product of this composition, because electroacoustic music is usually a polished product that you finish and you play, and then you spatialize and sound with it, the array of speakers that are provided for the concert. So this tablet allowed me to get closer to the composer, creator, / producer and performer. And again, so now I needed to find some new boundaries of, okay, well, if I'm doing this type of music, I need to stay focused with Ableton. And so I was wondering, what can Ableton provide with playing with sound in space? So Ableton has Max for Live. They have a collaboration, and there's some plugins that Max for Live created to allow a producer to implement a specialization in their composition. So with that being said, again, I needed to limit myself with things that were native with the project, with the software, because again, there's plenty of free software, but I wanted to find things that are easy accessible. So all that I'm speaking about is within the library of Max for Live in Ableton. So to play music, there are several places that think about space. And throughout the places that I've assessed that are dealing with sound in space, I realized that the 4D sound system is a beautiful environment where they can move sound in space, and instead of being an immersive set of speakers that are unidirectional, this is omnidirectional. So every speaker, so it's every column has 3 speakers, lower, mid, and a high one, and you can move your sound within that structure. And again, this uses Ableton as a framework to be able to put your sound in space. This is a very interesting project because instead of being closed within a certain amount of speakers, then because the speakers are omnidirectional, then the sound can be spread all over that room. But unfortunately, this is a unique system, but it's still a very interesting research that allowed people to think beyond just to have the directional speakers. There's the Dolby Atmos. The reason why I found these things interesting and why we can connect these Spiral Studio, the 4D sound system, the Dolby Atmos, is the dimension of height within the presentation of electronic of sound and spatialization. I grew up composing music in 8 channels, so it was an immersive environment, but it was only on a horizontal level. And I think having height implemented creates a little detail that can really be perceived and help to enhance the listening experience, because again, sound is not just on a 2D, but it's also on a 3D, and this system allows to go in that direction. Since these systems are a bit more advanced, and I wanted to find something that was closer to what I can have access. So the Dolby Atmos, what is interesting is that they have speakers on the floor, but also above the head of the audience. And what is interesting is their plugin allows to, if you want to do a binaural version of your creation, you're allowed to condense all the speakers within a plugin that can, so that plugin is very similar to how Max for Live plugin works. So for me, when I went to London and tried their studio that allows to put sound in space, I was really happy to see that it was a very easy transition to go from their plugins and what I was already using. So unfortunately, this is something that is not commercially available yet, but there's a tendency of having systems that go in that direction. And Ministry of Sound in London is one of the first nightclub going that direction. They have opened another nightclub in Chicago in USA called the Sound Bar, so it's a second one. And they're already talking about opening in Tokyo and Berlin in the future. So there's a commercial viable future for these systems because I did experience this nightclub and it really makes a greater experience. The first time I went to the Ministry of Sound to hear the system, unfortunately none of the DJ knew how to play with the system. So pretty much the whole night it was a stereo that was put on all the system. The second time I went, Steve Lawler was a DJ that knew how to play with the system, but again, he played perhaps 33% of the night with that system because it's something that you need to think about, and he used it pretty much as an effect, as something that you just put as an effect. As opposed as, I think that when you create music, it should be completely and constantly be part of your composition. And this is how, when I make music, space is definitely a dimension that should be involved throughout the creative process. There are other places like SARC that offers a system of surround and height and elevation and even underneath. But again, these are places that are quite unique, and it's, again, I want something that can be easily translatable from one system to the other. So I've been assessing those places, and so I'm trying to find something that is easy for everyone. So a bit like James was saying, when you compose music, so some of the technique to be able to kind of use space efficiently is to put the lower frequencies on the lower circle. So the studio I'm working in Huddersfield here at the Spatial has 3 rings of 8 speakers, so a lower, a mid, and a high. So when I compose, I tend to spend the low frequency kick on the lower ring, and then try to mix the mid and the high frequencies within the higher and the mid ring of speakers. So this is the plugin from Maxwell Live within Ableton. And this is a diagram of how I start composition and where I put sound and what we can do with it. A reason why I'm still trying to see what is interesting when you compose with space is the fact that if people are moving, well, location is not really such a precise thing that is necessary. So I like to mix sounds that are sometimes moving, but it's not. I don't need a sweet spot in the middle. I think what is interesting is to have sounds moving constantly, going up, going down, and circling, to give a sense that if you're moving, you don't feel that you're diminishing your experience of listening. So I guess from the dimension of what I've assessed throughout the research is what was important for me is to find tools that works and that can also work in the future, in the sense that Ableton has released Ableton 10, and they also look into that direction of implementing more chances to have specialization. I did some tests of how I could translate what I'm experiencing in the spiral within a stereo recording, because as much as I like to perform in the studio, there's not many people that can come to Huddersfield and listen to what I'm trying to do. So I tried to find a way to translate from the 24 channels into a stereo. And the way I was able to do it is using a dummy head that can replicate what the listening person can hear. Although it's not perfect, so what I basically was able to do is to capture one of my performances with this dummy head, and then have a stereo version of my composition, and then mix the two together to be able to perceive. So this result can be a bit personal and subjective, but I think I came to, it's going to be on my YouTube channel, that we can listen to the performance of this, and to not only have a sense that the sound is moving around us, but it's going up and down, because since the dummy head can recreate the perspective of the height that is in the 3 ring. So I think this is something that gave me a lot of, I would say, potential of how I can translate many channels into a stereo, because again, most people listen to music with their phone and their headphones, and I think it's still a market that we need to reach, and so that's why, for me, a translation from what I experienced here on the studio into a stereo format, I think it's still important. So the fact that Dolby Atmos is going that direction, they open new nightclubs, that there's spaces like the 4D sound system, SART, the Spiral are still promoting the sound in space. I think this is something that we still have to push and to promote, because I think there's lots of things going on, and like James was researching, we find that even with ambisonics and video games and virtual reality that is come back to the front, I think these are places where specialization has an important dimension. So that's going to be it for today. If there's any question, yes.
Thanks, Sebastien. I really enjoyed that talk. Did you, just following on from James's talk, you talked about creating something that could be for multi-channel, but then have the option to fold down to stereo. Have you tried ambisonics in your work, or did you find that didn't work as well? So I'm guessing from the Max tools you mentioned, it's not ambisonics, is it?
No, it's not ambisonics, and again, because I restricted myself to work within Ableton Live and to work as a performer in a live setting, I didn't find the tools that could produce this type of thing. So I am limited because I decided to use the push and to be a performer and to find something that works in a live setting. So I know ambisonic works, but it's something that I feel that I would be better placed to use as working after the performance. And for me, I need something that works in live settings, because I found a new love in the performance side of things. And if I was just a composer and working with a product that is already made, ambisonic would be very tempting. But because I'm doing the live things, and I need something that allows me to play with these sounds, to write those sounds in advance, so when I'm performing, everything is already taken care of. I found all of my answer within Ableton Live. So I know ambisonics has, to some extent, better ways to translate to stereo, but because of the dimension of the live performance, it kind of restricted me a bit. Yes.
How, well, in your opinion, after speaking to like DJs at Ministry of Sound, how many of them are doing what you're doing, in the sense that they are focusing on layering, tell me if I'm wrong, but layering the performative aspect of electronic music on top of an existing stereo stem, and how many are going, right, let's consider it from the start as a spatial piece of music?
Well, I think what happens with them is that the stems that they have and they bring to the Ministry of Sound is something that is not really considered before, and I feel that they use it as an effect that it's an interesting effect
for like build-ups.
Exactly, but it's not a constant dimension of their music, and I think when you start tasting what you can do with space, I think it's something that should always be there. It's like when you start dealing with rhythm, you just continue. It's not just, okay, let's play on the rhythm right now. I think composing with space should be already from the beginning, and something that you can spend time doing it. So instead of just going to a place and just adding an effect, I think it should be from perspective from the beginning, yes. Any other question? Well, thank you for listening, and now we will hear Jo talking about her perspective, and you also are interested with the binaural.
Yeah, I do headphones.
Yes.
I think we're going to be really good friends. You and I, Sebastian. Great presentation. I'd like to discuss this with you a bit more.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.